Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. We have a super special presentation today. My name is Jenna Paone. I have the absolute pleasure of being here with Mighty Blaze's founder and CEO, New York Times best-selling author, Jenna Blum, to celebrate the release of a whole new way of thinking about fiction. This is her audio drama. It's a World War II historical romance, and it's called The Key of Love, and it's premiering today on the Emerald Audio Network, which is a podcast network created by #1 best-selling author and women's fiction icon Jane Green to tell stories about women, by women, for women, and for everyone. And we are so thrilled. Jenna is the first. Jane has premiered one of her stories, but Jenna is the first new author not new author, but you are the first author to premiere on this. So we are so excited to celebrate this today. Jenna, welcome, and welcome to your own thing that you've created.
I mean, I have to say, Jenna, so you get two Jennas for the price of one, as Jenna says, like you get two Jennas. But I have to say, we were talking about this on the walk over to the Fairmont Copley, where the podcast is set. And in this beautiful historic hotel in Boston's very Tony Back Bay. And we were walking from my apartment over to the hotel. And I was saying it's such a trip when somebody inspires your imagination like Jane Green did by inviting me to write this. Thank you, Queen Jane. I love you so much. And then you have it made real by actors who are reading this audio drama podcast and an original score, and then you have friends to get dressed up and play with you and introduce it, and it's just the whole thing is like this enormous privilege and also a dream come true.
And I just want to draw attention to Jenna's beautiful ensemble today. And we are in the lovely historic Fairmont Copley Hotel here in Boston, broadcasting live. This is a new thing for all of us. We're doing this new locations that are all totally virtual. So we're so excited to discuss this in person today. Let's talk about the key of love. So first of all, Jenna, tell us, for those of you at home who might not know what's going on, tell us a little bit about the Emerald Audio Network, about Jane Green, and about how this came to be, and tell us a little bit about what is an audio drama.
Okay, great question, Jenna. Thank you. So the key of love is an audio drama, and I keep telling people it's not your grandma's podcast, but actually it kind of is your grandma's podcast because it's like an old-fashioned radio play. So, I know, it's so
I love it. It's like a teleplay. It's so great.
It is. It's like, so remember in the olden days when like it would be like, and then the door opens and somebody walked in. And so that is kind of what it's like, except with new production value. And so what happened was, I think in May, I want to say, Jane was like, I'm working with Emerald Audio Network to produce a series of podcast audio dramas for women, by women, for men and women, by women, but by female authors. And would you do one? And I was like, let me think about it. Okay, I would love to do one. Okay, ask me how my arm twisted. Yes, I will totally do that. And I have never written a podcast script before. I've never written an audio drama before. I have never written historical romance before, although I do write historical fiction, but this is like a whole new genre for me also. And so The Key of Love, it's set in this hotel, which is the most fantastic place. It was built in like the early 1900s, and the drama is set in 1943 when America is embroiled in the height of the war, and things could go one way or they could go the other way. It's a very tippy, very crucial, very dangerous time. And the Key of Love follows a chambermaid who works in the Back Bay, and she gets ousted from the only home and job she's ever known. And she has aspirations of becoming a singer, which is discovered when she comes to work at this hotel. And she takes up with a composer named Francis Key, who is staying here to compose an anthem to inspire the troops at this very dangerous stage of the war. And Libby, her name is Liberty, becomes his muse. Thank you. And much more. And like all of this goes, you know, sort of swimmingly until we find out that Libby has a fiance named Clancy Armstrong, who is a photographer overseas and is coming home. And what does she do? So the choices that she makes in this podcast about her own singing, about these two men, they actually change not only these three lives, but the course of the whole war.
I love it. So Jenna, talk me through. So what came first, did you have this idea sort of kicking around in the back of your mind, and then, you know, you decided that this was going to be the right format for this, or did the format inspire the story? Because as you said, it's a departure in format, it's a departure in genre, it's a departure in even the way you go about, you know, as somebody who's written scripts before, it's just a different, you know, it's a totally different animal. So you, and obviously you are very accomplished and published author who has had, you know, released many books to great critical and commercial acclaim. But what was this experience like for you? And I'd love to hear how that went and how the story came about as a result of this difference in format.
Yeah, thank you. Such a great question. So I don't know anything about writing scripts. Like, I wrote the script for.
Could have fooled me.
Thank you. I made Jenna read it, and I made our producer Jane Roper read it. I made Julie Gershman. I think I made a lot of people read this. And Jane Green is probably like, I'm so done reading that script, darling. I've read it a million times. Eyeballs falling out. But I don't know how to write a script. I wrote a screenplay for my first novel, Those Who Save Us, which taught me that I'm not a screenwriter, but it was a great experience. And yet, when Jane said I'm doing this podcast audio drama sort of radio play format, I thought, that just sounds so fun. And in fact, I had this historical romance idea kicking around in the back of my mind since 2019. I'll tell you, I think you may actually remember.
This is one of those little behind the scenes things where I kind of knew that this idea.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about it.
Jenna. So Jenna and Jane and a lot of us who work on the plays were in a novel workshop together that I was leading, that I was teaching. And during intermission one evening when we were all out like getting snacks and like booze and whatever, I said, I think we should all do this thing called Summer Fling, where we take a break from our big, huge Herculean novel projects and just write something like a one-off that is like fun. And I'm going to write this romance, and it's going to be about a chambermaid turned singer who works at the Copley Fairmont, who is trying to choose between two men, and one is a composer and the other one is a war photographer, and like, what does she do, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, ha! And everybody was looking at me. I downloaded this in like 3 minutes, and they said, you should write that. And I was like, I can't write that. It's like historical. It's like, I don't do romance. I don't do whatever. So Key of Love is a departure for me in two ways. I don't do romance normally, although I do love and sex, but not romance. I guess maybe that's the same thing. And I don't do podcast script, but it was such a plug and play for this project. And I told Green, and she was like, darling, it's a wonderful idea. You should totally do it. And I was like, okay, because Jane makes you believe you can do anything. And so we love her. And so I wrote a treatment for it, for Jane and for Emerald Audio, who's our sponsor company, our production company. And then they brought in this guy whose name is Tommy Lombardi. And like, Tommy, I hope you are watching, because Tommy, baby, we love you. So Tommy took my treatment, excuse me, and broke it down into a script. And then he and I actually sat on a Zoom and talked through every episode and what were the beats that we had to hit and what were the cliffhangers and what were the this and what were the that. And then they kicked the script back to me and I rewrote the entire script. So if there are any errors in it or anything you think are especially stupid things, those are mine, not Tommy's. But Tommy really helped me shape an idea into a script, and then I reshaped the script, and then we sent it to production. And now, guys, I've heard the trailer, which I'm obsessed with, but I have never heard any of the episodes. I've never heard the original music. There's a song in it called The Lady Liberty that I've never heard, that I will not hear until that episode drops in late December, early January. And I'm cry. Like, I can't wait to hear the actors bring this to life. I'm so honored and so excited.
And it's so interesting because often as authors, you know, we hear people in our heads. Like, we sort of hear the people and we see the people. And it'll be so interesting to see how the voices match up with what you intended. And on that note, I do want to point out, so just a reminder, The Key of Love is out today. Episode 1 is out today. Wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you download any or listen or stream or any of those things, you can find The Key of Love. Search for Key of Love, Jenna Blum, Emerald Audio Network, and you can listen along. And I love that. So to me, one of the most brilliant things about this is that you chose a story that is in the era when audio plays were, like audio dramas and comedy and you know, teleplays in general were a huge part of the culture. I mean, that was the gathering around. You gathered around the radio in the evenings. And I love that there's just this perfect, it's sort of like this perfect meeting of idea and format that it really lends itself to the story. I'm curious, as you were writing it, were there any surprises in writing, and did the new format sort of change the story for you at all? Did writing in this time period, like you're writing, of the time period for a medium that really was in the time period, did that sort of work with you? Did you sort of feel any of that, that big magic, coming in and sort of informing? What were the surprises along the way as you wrote this?
Yeah, really good question. There are always surprises in writing. All of you watching who are writers know that writing is constantly surprising you. Haha, surprise. And I am a very container store brain writer. I write from an outline.
Yep.
We had the Key of Love has 8 episodes. Mm-hmm. They're getting released as a serial, so it's like a series. You can't binge it. You can hear the first 2 episodes today on Apple, on Spotify, on Audible, on Libro, whatever. You're going to have to wait for 3 and 4, wait for 5 and 6, and then wait for the grand finale. And we'll be doing this kind of period promo for the whole thing. So watch this space. But anyway, so to answer the question you actually asked, I knew what the episodes were going in, mm-hmm. and I didn't depart from it that much. But what surprised me was it's very difficult in a way to dramatize, for instance, in an audio way, people kissing.
Yeah.
So I would put in Francis and Libby kiss rapturously, as one does. Yeah. And the producer, Garrett Scott, who was amazing, would say to me, Jenna, we can't do a caress. We can't do a kiss. Right. We can't do somebody swallowing nervously because it will sound like, ooh. Right. So you have to figure out a way to dramatize that. And right. The other thing is when I write a time period, a stretch of days, yeah. I usually use a montage in fiction, and you can't do montage easily in audio, or you can in a screenplay, but not in audio because it's just confusing. It's yeah. Francis and Libby are in the coat room. Francis and Libby are in the kitchen. Francis and Libby are on the roof, and they're mashing all over this beautiful hotel, right. which may or may not happen in episode 5 or 6. But we had to figure out a way to make that audible, and right. so I had to do workarounds, and so I put it all in dialogue. And that was the most surprising thing to me, was that I thought I was not great at writing dialogue.
I was going to say, change your relationship to how you, because you only have dialogue. You don't even have, it's not film either, where you can, create a thing of this is the shot and we're going to set it up and you can see somebody's look, or, and without it being, one thing I feel when I read the script and when I listen to it is not overly expositional either. It doesn't sound like, now I am going into the other room. You had to find ways to do this in a really subtle and clever way. Did that change how you view yourself as a dialogue writer? And did you find, did you pick up any tricks along the way, or did you feel maybe, are we going to get a master class in writing dialogue now because you've written an exclusive audio play?
Maybe. I mean, I think also because the production company, because Emerald is so superb, yeah. The dialogue gets enhanced and in some way aided by the sound effects. If you listen to the trailer, which again I'm obsessed with, when we joined Clancy, who's shooting at the front in Europe, they're warplanes. So it's Clancy would be right. Hey, I just got a letter from my girl at home. Meow, meow, right. So, and you hear his camera shh, shh, shh. So yeah. I think that any clumsiness I might have had with the dialogue maybe gets a little bit eclipsed by that, thank goodness. But I think one thing I often tell writers is, if you're putting something in your story that you think is too ham-handed, you're probably actually doing it right, because your reader has a lot of things competing for his or her interest.
That's a really good
point.
And
so in the dialogue, I had to force myself to take my own advice and have people say things like, I love you so much, or whatever shall I do, or I have to tell them both the truth, things that in a book that might have seemed a little too obvious to me, but work much better in the audio setting.
I completely agree. I really think you nailed it on it, and I think it's not jarring at all. And as somebody who I love, for example, listening to audiobooks. So this is a great. I mean, I think this whole concept that Jane and Emerald Audio are doing with this whole series is wonderful, because I do think we're busy. You don't always have time. Especially I'm a mom of a young child, and sometimes the only way I can listen to anything, can read, is to just listen.
Yes.
And while I'm doing something else. And so I think this is a great new format and a great way to explore stories in a different way. and thinking about this, like I'd love to see like a podcast club start the way that, you know, like we got to get like the Emerald Audio Network, like podcast club going so we can have like some book talk discussions. Episodically, so did you find any, so obviously, you know, like as writers, like a novel traditionally follows 3-act structure, and you obviously have 6 episodes. So what was it like to, obviously you have the overarching arc, and then you have an arc in each one, which is the same basically as writing a scene. You know, every scene should have an arc in the same way. Did you feel like it was different in any way to write episodically? Did you have to, again, think about this in a different way, or did it just feel like chapters for you and you were like, okay, I'm writing, 6 chapters, so I need to tell the story in 6 chapters. How did that work for you and your writer brain?
Yeah, it actually worked really well, Jenna. Thank you for asking. Because, I mean, I think this is how I write novels too, is I'll write a chapter, but the chapter to me is like a short story that has like a dramatic arc within that chapter, a cliffhanger at the end that makes you want to read more. A short story usually leaves the reader hanging in some way. And then a novel puts all of those stories together and then brings it hopefully to a satisfying conclusion, but with a podcast. And I think I'm not good with math, but I think there are 8 episodes, actually. Yeah, 8 episodes. And so the first 2 drop today, and then 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8. So there'd be like 4 of these delicious sort of interludes. But I knew that each episode had to be its own story, and each one would introduce you to something new about the characters and raise the stakes and give you extra drama, like more drama, like all the drama.
There's a lot of drama.
There's so much drama. There's a love triangle. There's war. There's like aspiration. There's female ambition. There's singing, whatever. And so each of the episodes amps the stakes up, and then hopefully leaves you wanting more, and then the end hopefully brings you to a conclusion that you love. Like I kind of love it. I'm in love with my own podcast, you guys. My own audio drama. Like I thought it was just a lark, and now it's like my love.
But so I love this because I feel like, you know, so full disclosure, you know, Jenna and I are friends, and we talk about craft, and we talk about writing, and we talk about ideas a lot. And this was something that you immediately were like, I am very into this, and I'm going to do it. And it was done like the next day. So like you wrote this fast, and you are a fast writer. When you have the idea that is like that you're chomping at the bit to work on, you work very quickly. Is this how you've always been as a writer? Is this something you've had to hone over time? And how do you, when you aren't maybe as excited about an idea as you were, like, so this seems like one of those things of it's just that magical thing of like you had the idea, you worked on it, it was done, it came to fruition very, very quickly. What was that like for you? Tell me a little bit about the joy of writing that, and your writing process of writing so fast, and how you deal when maybe the idea isn't as immediate, or like you don't immediately have that magic.
Yeah, I'm really spoiled with this actually, because when I write a book, it takes me, I am a fast writer, but I'm a very particular ideator. And what I mean by that is, I don't write something unless I feel that magic. Yeah, because otherwise I'm going to be spending, when I write a book, it takes me like 6 months to a year to write a book, and then it gets alchemized from a manuscript into a book, and then I'm promoting it, which I love to do for like as long as freaking possible. So I'm really cheek and jowl with that project for a long time. I won't do it unless there's magic, which means that behind the scenes, I'm trying on an idea, discarding it, trying it on and discarding it, trying on and discarding it. Like I'm dating all of my ideas. If I don't feel that magic with my idea, I'm like, not you.
There's no ring.
There's not going to be a ring on that finger unless, no, right? Exactly.
Unless it's true love.
Unless it's true love, right? Exactly. And so I think, but every once in a while also I get an assignment, and this was like an assignment for something I'd never done before. So I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have to work with this for 3 years. It's going to be like 6 months. It'll be fun. It'll be a joy to work with Jane. It'll be work, like a new experience for me. And then I surprised myself by falling in love with it. So like all of my projects, I spent a long time thinking about it, developing it in my mind, writing an outline by hand, like a crazy person, putting it on my wall.
I love that you do it by hand, like in that. And like, and if you're ever somebody who Jenna helps with her writing, Jenna will write your outline by hand and break it down for you in a way that you never understood. Like she'll just be like, oh yeah, you have 4 characters. Here's it, two chapters each. This is what you do. Here's your book. And like, I love it. You have that very right brain organizational. You know, and like as much as you are a creative left brain person, you are also, but like I'm sort of half and half too. Like I'm very organized, and like I like my benchmarks. I like my goalposts to hit, right?
Yeah.
It's helpful.
Yep.
So it's I love talking to people about their, the way their creative brains work.
Yeah. And this one, because it had those beats, like it's romance, it's so much easier than literary fiction because things have to happen a certain way. Like there has to be like some sex. I'm sorry, you guys, there's sex in this. Like there is. It's audio, so it's not like there's got to be a roller coaster. Right?
We don't want to do any spoilers, but there's got to be a roller coaster. There's got to be a big emotional roller coaster.
There's like a big.
There's going to be coming together. There's going to be going apart. There's going to be, we're going up and down.
Yeah.
And when you've got a love triangle, there's a certain story that lends itself around that love triangle.
Yeah, so I kind of like broke my own heart because I actually fell in love with all of the characters, and I'm like, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just be? But I think so. Once I had the idea down for this, and we'd broken it down into the beats, which again, Tommy Lombardi helped me with. But once we organized it that way, I sat down in the chair, which is another thing I'm very bad at. I like to flit around wearing costumes as much as possible. But once I got my butt in the chair, I was in my house in Minnesota, and I wrote the whole thing in 4 days. So I wrote 2 episodes per day for 4 days. And then we revised and revised and revised.
I don't know if it's something about every time I've written a script, it goes very quickly. And I think there's something about the visual. Like I almost feel like as an author, I should write my books like this, where like the scene is easier to like when you're talking about it, like, oh, she does this and then this and this is what they said. And like, you're not worried about the filler. And the filler, without the filler, like suddenly you're not as worried and the story just comes out in like a very pure, organic way that I think is, and I think that's actually why I see some authors transitioning to, for example, writing in present tense, because it's the same thing. You're describing the scene,
it's like blocking.
Yeah,
it's like blocking and dialogue. Your skeleton's down. Although I will say, I have seen when I've been promoting this, some of my audience has been kind enough to say, "Where's the book? Will there be a book?" I really want this to be a book.
Please.
Actually, like I'm very excited about it. So I'm working with my agent on this. But I think that because I already know like what the story is, and I really love these characters, and I really love their story, and it turned out to be much bigger than just like a romance. It's like that is what happens, but it really is about female ambition and how do you succeed, and how do you succeed, especially when the time and the culture and the zeitgeist conspire to hold you down.
And on that note, let's talk a little bit more about the story.
Okay.
Because, and the characters, I want to talk about, and so number one, Liberty. Great name. I mean, like this name is fabulous. She is our heroine. She is a chambermaid who is who, due to an unfortunate circumstance, is dismissed from her place of employment, which is also her home. She is an orphan. She is alone. She does not have family or stability, and she is completely down on her luck. And then through a series of events, she ends up working at the gorgeous and historic Fairmont Copley Hotel, which is where we are again filming live from here, from one of their beautiful ballrooms, and just generally getting to know everyone in the hotel and making ourselves at home.
It's good to be a writer,
right?
Yeah.
This is not a bad way to spend
writer.
a
Like
Thursday.
every year or 3 years or 5 years or something, I get to do this.
So she ends up at the Copley, and that's where everything starts to change. So can you tell us a little bit more about the story and a little bit more about what inspired? Number one, I want to know the kernel of the idea of where this came from. Did you start with Libby, and where did she come from? I want to hear the origin. Did you start with, I want to set it in the Copley and I'm going to do that, or I want to write about a singer? Tell me how that idea came together and how Liberty the person became the one that you wanted to center the story around.
Yeah, thank you. So I love Libby. So Libby is a chambermaid by trade. Her mom is a Norwegian immigrant who gives birth to her on the ship coming into Boston Harbor, which is why her name is Liberty. And then everybody calls her Libby, and she's like this Norwegian. I'm part Norwegian. So I wanted to nod to my own heritage. And I always advise writers to write about what they're interested in and what they love, and to try and do not only armchair travel, which is what writing historical fiction is, but like armchair life, like armchair profession. And I love, like Jenna actually is a singer. Like, she is a singer, songwriter. She's a
not as much these days,
but whatever. You're going to make you sing at some point during all this promo. But I have always wanted to be a singer. I sing in my car. But
you
for
have a nice voice, Jenna.
Thank you. Oh, did you say you want me to sing? You did say that.
Why, yes, I did.
I was like, no, I didn't actually say that. So, but I did take singing lessons when I was researching this because I wanted to know what the physicality was like, and it allowed me to live a sort of alt life. So I knew that I wanted my character to be a chambermaid. She was kind of her own person. She was just like, yeah, I am a chambermaid. And then I wanted her to have this aspiration of being a world-class chanteuse. And how could she do that when she was working as a maid and she used to busk with her mom in the public garden for like pennies? And so the thing that she thinks that is the worst thing that has ever happened to her, which is getting kicked out of this very Tony mansion where she works after the governor's son makes a pass at her at a New Year's Eve party and she fights him off. Like, this is not a total spoiler, but she fights him off and has this sort of Me Too moment. And then she gets dismissed because the governor and his son are very powerful. And she is like totally down on her luck, gets picked up by another chambermaid while she's shivering at like a trolley shelter and like ends up at the Copley. And then her story like gives her entree into a life that she would not have had if she hadn't had this terrible thing happen to her. So I probably did just spoil the first episode a tiny bit, but I think like when you listen to it, just having it be dramatized is like, it's such a kind of a luscious thing. And by the way, I haven't heard any of the episodes. Like, I think I might have said that, but I have heard none of them.
We need a reaction.
Like later today, I'm going to be listening to the first ones. I have an Instagram live at 3. So if you're over on Insta, you can see me doing this again. But then as soon as that's done, I'm just going to like put my headphones on and listen and freak the F out because I get to hear all of this brought to life, as you will as well.
I love it. And if anyone has any questions from the audience, please take them. We're going to take them in just a couple minutes. I'm going to ask Jenna a few more questions, and then we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. And I also just want to say a very big thank you to our producers behind the scenes, to the lovely Jane Roper and Julie Gerstenblatt, both of whom have their debut novels coming out this spring. Jane's is a wildly hilarious romp of a novel called The Society of Shame, which is a modern take on cancel culture and feminism and a million other wonderful things. And it's such a great book. And Julie's is a fabulous historical fiction narrative called Daughters of Nantucket, which follows 3 women in and around the days of the Great Fire of Nantucket of 1864, 46. I always get that mixed up. 46. One of them. It's one of the 1800s. It's sometime in the 1800s.
Olden times.
But please keep an eye on Jane Roper and Julie Gerstenblatt and follow along because they are talking about their upcoming books, and we love them and we're so excited for them.
Yes.
Back to the Key of Love for a few more questions. So one of the things you mentioned, there's a little Me Too moment, and one of the things I said to you before the interview that I'm going to repeat here is I think you have done an excellent job of writing a historical story that feels modern and fresh without feeling forced. You know, sometimes as we love to kind of impose our 21st century values upon characters of other eras, we maybe go a little too far. I think you've hit a great balance of you know, really exploring the idea of the struggle between ambition, especially for a woman. I mean, this is a very feminist-centered story. This is a story about ambition and about a woman choosing not simply between men, but choosing life paths. And it's really about, you know, and it's of course something that we're kind of in the middle of a societal reckoning of discussing what is the role of women and what is the role of women in families and what is, you know, the burden of childcare and the burden of marriage and what are these things doing. And we can only think of how many incredibly talented and ambitious and creative women have been stifled over the years by being in institutions which did not support and uplift them and encourage their dreams outside of their homes. Let's talk about that and you know, for you being a creative woman, and how you sort of explored this idea and why this was the topic that you wanted to focus on, and how you went about constructing Liberty's various problems and romantic entanglements and dilemmas from that lens, while also being true to the historical time period.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. I think there are some things that are sort of universally true. And so when I'm describing Libby's sort of entrance into her own drama, in the first episode as a Me Too moment. It's because that's how we think of it now, but it's not something that's new to women, like having to fight off unwanted advances. And so what I love about historical fiction is that it throws, as if through a prism, our lives back to us and asks us, like, what are we still dealing with? What are the problems that we face? How far have we come? Have we come far? What do we do with our choices? And so Libby has to face things like she's an ambitious woman who has a love affair with an ambitious man. She is an ambitious woman who is affianced to a man who doesn't see her as an ambitious woman, who thinks she'll kind of grow out of it. And
who is also a creative.
Who is also a creative. Like, so all of these people are, that's a good point. Like, obviously, like, I only deal with creatives because, like, I'm surrounded by creatives, and I love creatives. I love new creatives. But I think that, like, it is such a symbolic thing that, like, all of them have a little bit of competition going on in this love triangle. Like Clancy Armstrong, the photographer, like, he's like, yeah, you're a singer. That's adorable. Like, you have a beautiful voice. I'm so proud of you, my songbird. But when she's like, I might not want to have children because I want to travel and be a chanteuse, he's like, that's great. You'll grow out of it. Pat, pat, pat. Yeah. And I think there may still be an teensy bit of that around in this day and age. Like, yeah, that's so great that you have this ambition until we need you to do something else. And I think the relationship between Libby and Frances is likewise super interesting because they need and use each other in this very generative way. Like, he's a composer, she becomes the muse, and he trains her to, like, how does this work and calibrate into each of their ambitions? So the delicate negotiations of ambition, of love, like, all of these people feel genuine love for each other, of ego, like, how does that play into the triangle? How does it signify for each of them individually? And then how does it play into this very historical moment at which each of them may have a role to play in a much, much bigger picture?
Oh, I love it. It's so good. It's so addicting. We're going to go, I saw a question from the audience that we're going to go back to, and it was, what was your favorite part of the story to research? Because we haven't spoken about your research yet. So let's talk about the research, and let's talk about some of the really fun bits. I, for one, just learned something is really a part of the Copley Hotel. I thought you made it up. Katie Copley. I did not realize Katie Copley was a real fit. It was a real dog. I was going to say a real person, but it's a dog. But talk about your research, some of your favorite tidbits that you discovered through the process, and how you went about doing all of that. Historical, the fun historical reading and research.
Yeah, like the jazz hands. So yeah, so at the Copley, if you guys ever come to downtown Boston, or if you're in downtown Boston, you know the Fairmont Copley is. It's this beautiful historic grand hotel. We found out today walking through the lobby from Bob.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Bob Fallon, not Bob Ryan. There are two bellmen who are, like, incredibly, two concierge who are, like, incredibly helpful. And he was like, did you know that Amelia Earhart actually had, like, a photo shoot on the roof here? And I was like, in all of my research, I did not know that. So I researched the hotel. I want to come back to the hotel, which I will do for future episodes, and talk more to Bob, the concierge, and Bob, the other concierge, talk to the doormen. There is also a dog here, and there's always been a dog mascot in the hotel, which obviously endears me to this place. They have a black lab mascot always. They had Katie Copley. Now she's gone. Now they have Corey Copley, who we were playing with in the lobby. But I love...
Who is Bob Fallon's dog.
Who is Bob Fallon's dog. Who's, like, so great.
And he gets to bring his dog to work.
I know, it's so cute. And she's, like, adorable.
We should also mention Jenna has an adorable black lab.
Yeah, who is home. Because he would have been like, hi, I steal the teenagers. I did
bring him next time.
Yeah, maybe. So, but I love stories that are about the back of the house of very grand places. So my third novel, The Lost Family, is about this very shishi restaurant, and I'm writing about the kitchen. And I love this beautiful historic hotel, and I'm writing about, like, the chambermaids' rooms under the eaves, like the secret spot where the staff
downstairs.
Yeah, gather upstairs, downstairs, exactly, like the linen closets, like the kitchen and staff room, family meal. Like, I love researching all of this. My favorite part, though, is the singing, because I did take singing lessons from this amazing woman named Arabella. And Arabella, if you're watching, I'm blanking on your last name because I'm a jerk, but I will put all of her information online. And she taught me many things, including how to breathe properly. And it was this really fascinating, like, here's a personal moment, but, like, my whole life I was told, like, suck in your stomach. Like, my mom was like, suck in your gut, suck in your gut, suck in your gut, because that was her era. And so I always grew up holding in my breath. And when I was learning with Arabella, she was like putting her hand on my stomach and saying, let it out. Like, you have to be like a balloon, like, make yourself bigger. And I was like, make yourself bigger. I'm trained to not do that. I'm trained to hold it in and be skinnier. And so it was very empowering, this research, in a way that I had not anticipated, and it became part of Libby's character.
I love that.
And her development as she goes on.
Right. I mean, and that's, again, something I think is universal, is sort of women being encouraged to make themselves smaller, to make themselves more malleable, to make themselves take up less space. And this is something that is a big part of Libby's journey, is learning whether she does want to stay smaller, whether she does want to get bigger.
Yeah, like when you get bigger, it's a bit of a risk because you make yourself a target, like you're exposed, but also when you're smaller, you can't get anything done. So it was like a great character development thing that the singing actually taught me, that like somebody who has been made small by life and by profession could step out of it and step into her own big dreams and desire.
And another question from the audience, from Christina, I believe: will there be more scripts like this in the future, dear Jenna? I loved the first 2 episodes. Do you think you'll repeat? Do you think you'll continue in this format?
Oh my God, you heard the first 2 episodes already? Like literally, I have to fan myself. It's so exciting! I can't wait to listen to them. I have to go listen to the episodes. I would love to write more scripts. We were talking about just anytime you set out in a new direction as a writer and it turns out to be delicious, you're like, oh, this is all I ever want to do ever. My agent is like punching herself in the eye right now. She's like, you have to go back to the big novel, big historical novel. But I love writing the scripts. I really enjoyed like getting to know my characters in this historical romance setting. I think it would be really fun. And I also think about writing thriller.
Ooh, yes, please.
Some of you know I have a dark side.
Let's move away from your dark side to the light. Do you have a favorite character from this script? And
oh my gosh.
It's hard to choose.
It is, because I love all the characters in a different way, as one says about children, right? But I have to say there was a surprise character who I really, really love. Is the female sidekick character, Libby's friend, the chambermaid at the hotel, Moxie Di Lorenza. And she is a Bostonian, born and bred, and she's like Italian.
Love it.
And I love
an
her.
Italian Bostonian.
Yeah. And I like, who does not love an Italian? And she's so great. And she was supposed to be like, again, like sort of a side character, but like in a lot of my favorite books
Best name
and
ever.
movies. Moxie Di Lorenza.
Moxie. Like, come on. Right? Who doesn't want to be named Moxie? I want to be named Moxie.
And she like is Moxie.
She is Moxie.
Like, she's like totally gritty,
like,
and totally practical.
Like, I consider it one of the biggest compliments if somebody's like, you have Moxie. Like, that is like, that's the compliment I'm always searching for. It's like that.
Like she's Moxie,
she embodies it.
And she does. And Libby is a little bit more timid because of her life circumstances and also by nature. And Moxie, who is always swearing, which is of course one of my favorite things to write. Yeah. She's just like, kid, what are you gonna do? Get over it. So you engaged, big deal. So you like, you think you're like not as good as the guest. You're not. Get over it. So I loved writing her. And so she was like in the characters in like Four Weddings and a Funeral, for instance, like the side characters sometimes steal the show, and Moxie's always like, step aside. I am here.
So on that note, I mean, we're so excited. We can't wait to listen. The script is incredible. So to remind everyone, it's out wherever you listen to podcasts. Emerald Audio Network. The story is called The Key of Love by Jenna Blum. We are so thrilled. Jane Green, thank you so much for beginning this. Thank you for doing this whole project with the Emerald Audio Network. It's such a great thing. And please go back and listen to Jane's. Jane did the first installment, and hers is out now. And also wherever you can listen to podcasts. Please drop Jenna a line on social media and let her know what you're thinking about the episodes and what you maybe like to see in the future. And at Jenna Blum is her handle on everything. And of course, check out A Mighty Blaze. If you're here, you already know us, but spread the word to your friends and family. Thank you so much again to Julia Gerstenblatt and Jane Roper, who went backstage. Yes, and Jane, we have to talk about Jane's outfit. So Jane should be the one sitting in this chair, because Jane is like an Andrew's sister. She is wearing her grandmother's suit from the 40s. This is commitment. And she has the hair and everything. And she looks incredible, and it's not doing justice because you're standing in front of this dark thing. Oh my goodness, Jane is amazing, and we can't wait for Jane's book, and we can't wait for Julie's book, and we're having so much fun here. We're going to have more parties as we have more installments of this, maybe even a big party at the end.
Yeah, big.
So all of you, please join us in celebrating virtually and in person. And of course, we want to just once again congratulate New York Times bestselling author, Blaze founder and CEO, Jenna Blum, on this incredible new addition to her literary canon. And we are so thrilled to see how it goes, and can't wait to listen. I'm telling you, the story is awesome. You will be hooked. I'm just so thankful that I got to read the script so I didn't have to wait to find out, because those weeks of waiting between the episodes are going to be really tough, because she wrote a really good one. She's going to have you on the edge of your seat, folks. And I can't wait to listen to it and experience it all over again. I love you. I'm so proud of you. This is awesome. What's next for you, Jenna? I mean, like new writing formats. You built a whole organization here in the place. What's next?
Good question, Jenna. So as I said, watch the space, right? Because I do want to develop Key of Love into a novel, and thinking about writing more podcasts for Jane, which I would love to do. And also we're going to be doing some interesting stuff with Blaze. So never a dull moment around here. But I just want to say thank you to my incandescent queen of glitter on-air host, and beautiful Jane, and beautiful Julie, who is at home and you can't see her, but she also is wearing glitter. And it is such a privilege have a community of people who help you bring your vision to actual 3D life and celebrate it with you and play with you in the realms of your imagination. And that includes all of you viewers and everybody who's listening to this audio drama podcast. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you for supporting us. And we just love you so much.
I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Once again, Jenna Blum, The Key of Love. Go listen to it everywhere you hear podcasts. And we will see you. You have another interview. If you haven't gotten enough today, please check out at 3 p.m.
3 p.m. on Instagram Live, K2 readers. Yes.
Awesome.
Readers. Yep. I'll be there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, Jenna. And we hope all of you out there have a fantastic day. And let us know what you think.
Yes.